Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. All right, welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. I am so excited because I have Steve Morris with me today. Steve is the owner of Franklin Personal Fitness. He's had this business for about 9 years and works with general fitness, people over 50, but really anybody. And he has an amazing story. I was really impressed when I started talking to him. I know his heart is bent on sharing his story and helping people overcome their trauma. So I'm really excited to have him here. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve. I'm so happy that you're here.
Yeah, Amber, thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to the conversation today and kind of get my story out there.
Yeah, awesome. So it's so funny because the way you and I even met, you had kind of come to social media. This was right around New Year's, and had said that you were ready to start sharing your story. And I was like, hey, I have a podcast that's going to be new, but we want to come on it and share your story. So that was kind of funny how we even met. But why don't you tell me real quickly kind of what your thoughts were and why you've decided to share your story?
Yeah, sure. So kind of going back to that post, I was looking at the new year. I don't really set resolutions, but everybody kind of sets new goals, I guess, for the new year. And I've always been the type of individual to not ask for help and internalize a lot of stuff. And so looking at the new year, I've had some personal things going on in the past several months. And I thought, this year I'm going to be different. I feel like I need to try to reach out to those people that might not have a voice or might not want to ask for help or share their story. So I kind of wanted to take a different approach going into the new year from just being a trainer and maybe reaching out to people, men in particular, that are afraid to share their story or that might carry shame and feel like that their past defines them, and kind of share what I've learned over the course of the past 16 months with someone else who might be able to relate to what I've dealt with. Yeah,
gosh, that's so awesome. And I think there's so much power in sharing your story, obviously, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, but man, it's so powerful. So do you want to kind of jump into it and start sharing with us a little bit about kind of where you come from and what your story consists of?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of start with the childhood, if you want to go that direction, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
So I was raised in a military family, moved around a lot as a kid, very strict Christian home, part of the church. And so I was kind of one of those kids growing up. I didn't get into a lot of trouble. I didn't party. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. So pretty straight-laced kid, but I still had a pretty rebellious spirit. And I was late to the game when it came to drinking and partying. I really didn't get into it until later on in college. And really for the past almost 20 years, alcohol has had a really big grip on my life. And it is basically, for lack of better words, it has caused a path of destruction. And we can kind of get more into that. But I was the kid that was raised in the church and did everything right. And then once I hit about 24, 25, I just went the other way. I joined the military and had big goals and dreams for that. And lack of better terms, I kind of started living for myself, and it did not end well. It caused a lot of hurt. Oh, go ahead.
Do you think do you think growing up in a Christian home, the rebelliousness is kind of what brought on the alcohol and being introduced to alcohol?
I don't know if it was so much the home, like my family. It was more the environment of the church I was in. And I hate to say, I don't want to blame the church, but I didn't have a lot of positive role models at a young age that were kind of steering me maybe on the right path to say, hey, there's other alternatives out there, other than being told if you do something wrong, you're going to hell. And I lived in a state of fear. So I didn't do anything maybe like the normal kids because I was too afraid of going to hell. So I didn't partake in partying and drinking and things like that. But it wasn't from my parents. It was more from being in a youth group and in the church and things like that.
It's almost repressed. So you were kind of repressing things, and when it comes out, it all comes out.
It does. Yeah.
I can relate to that for sure. Okay, so I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but go ahead. You're 24, 25, and then where does it go from there?
Yeah, so I joined the Navy. I got my contract in the Navy at 25, and I'm in Franklin, Tennessee. At the time, I was working in Franklin, Tennessee as a personal trainer, and I basically told everyone I'm never coming back here. I don't want to come back to Tennessee. I'm gonna join the Navy. I'm gonna go to BUD/S. My goal was to be a SEAL, and that's all I cared about. And I was kind of gonna put everything in the rear view once I left. And that was a crucial moment in my life where I should have been stronger in my faith and allow God to walk with me instead of kind of turning my back on him. And that's what I did. I basically said, I'm going to live for Steve. And it just really, I'm 43, so I was 25 at the time. It's really just kind of spiraled out of control because I've had that control freak mindset my whole life. And I thought I can control everything. And I've learned the hard way that I can't. So
how often were you drinking at that time?
It was more of a social thing. So before I joined the Navy, I actually trained to become a marathon runner because I thought it would help me out. And that was a typical routine. We'd go run miles or trails and stuff, and then we would have a few beers afterward. And I was young, so I just kind of kept doing it. But it wasn't an everyday thing. It was more of a weekend thing.
It started that way, but then progressed.
Well, I still drank during the week, but I didn't go to like a liquor store and buy, a bottle of whiskey every day, or I didn't use alcohol to go to sleep at night or to get through the day. It was more of my mentality was, work hard, play hard. And if, here's a good example, Amber. So I ran my first half marathon in 2014. And this was back when they called it the country music half and full marathon in Nashville. And we had to be at the race at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I showed up drunk, and I'd been out the night before. I'd gone on a blind date and stayed out all night. And my mindset was, if I could run this thing hungover or still drunk, then I can do anything. And the two guys I ran the race with looked at me like I was an idiot because I showed up. We actually met at an old studio. We were all trainers, and they were like, "Man, what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I got this. It's not a big deal." I ran it. I got through the race, but the rest of the day I was wrecked. But that was the egotistical, the prideful mindset that I had, that I was indestructible, that nothing could stop me. And that was a really immature, stupid way to look at life. And one of those same guys, he was a recovering alcoholic at the time, and he told me, he said, if you would stop drinking, you would be one of the best runners around here. And I just laughed at it. I'm like, nah, there's whatever, man. Like, I'm young, I'm leaving. So I was just full of myself. I was just too big of an ego. So there's a famous line in the movie Top Gun. It says, your body or your ego writes checks that your body can't cash. And that was me. I was basically that guy, and I didn't care. I really did.
Mm-hmm.
But
so when did you start to see that this was a problem or an issue in your life?
It really didn't come to head until about 2010. And it was really the ending of my first marriage was because of alcohol. And it just got to be, it still wasn't a daily occurrence. It wasn't something to get through just the mundane life or whatever. It was all the repressed emotions that I had inside of me, all the self-doubt, self-hatred. I hated myself for years, and I would drink to try to numb that. And so usually what would happen is, some people say they're a happy drunk. I wasn't that guy. I mean, I would be the one looking for a fight. I would get angry. I had a really bad temper when I was younger, and so for me, nothing good ever came out of alcohol. So that was the kind of the turning point was 2010, but it actually got worse from there. Is when it really started to get worse. But
Did
that was
the
really where I started to notice it.
did the divorce make it worse?
Um, I wouldn't say it made it worse, but I don't know how much I want to share with all of this, but the an event happened before the divorce, and that's where my self-hatred really kicked up to a new level.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually, let's see, I don't know if I want to share all this. Let's just say that it was a very publicized incident that took me years to kind of build my reputation back. And so that was more of the cause than, excuse me, than the actual divorce was.
Mm-hmm. Because I know sometimes when things feel like everything's falling apart, we turn to those crutches even more. So I've seen it in my own
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
life and in things that I do and crutches that I have where if things start going downhill and it's like a domino effect where things begin to, everything shifts at one time. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So things get worse, and then where did it go from there? At what point did you
Um,
realize?
so really the worst point or the turning point was in October of 2021. Prior to that, and I forgot this part, I actually had stopped drinking for about a year and a half. And at this point I'm remarried, and I quit because I just was being told, hey, you've got a drinking problem, you're an alcoholic. And I took that as, no, I'm not. I can stop whenever I want to. So I quit, but I didn't quit for the right reason. A, I didn't quit for myself, and B, I didn't quit because I thought I had a problem. I just quit to prove someone wrong and to prove a point. So I stayed sober for about a year and a half, and then I kind of crept back into it. And when I had stopped drinking, that time I was really into bourbon, and I'd never drank bourbon when I was younger. I had some clients that were bourbon collectors, and they kind of turned me on to it. And man, I had no control of that stuff. I mean, it was not like drinking beer. I mean, bourbon just, it was a whole different level. And so I initially had quit drinking liquor when I'd stopped drinking, but when I got back into drinking, it was just beer. And I'm trying to think what year this would have been. This had to be probably 2016 or 17. And the beer drinking was really just a weekend thing. It never affected my work. I didn't drink during the week, so I didn't stay up late. Because I mean, as a trainer, you're getting up early every day to come to work, and so I would kind of use it as almost like a cheat meal, on the weekends. And so kind of going forward, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but I had a pretty bad accident in October of 2021. And do you want me to go ahead and get into that, or do you want me to?
Sure. If it was, is
Okay.
that pertains to the alcohol?
Yeah, this was the turning point for me. So I had been sitting at my house. It was a Saturday, and a typical Saturday for me was basically just hanging around drinking beer. That's kind of what I did. I would get up and work out in the morning, and I'd come home, and then just kind of hang around the house. Well, my neighbor was outside, and he actually invited me over to smoke a cigar. I enjoy smoking cigars. And I go to his house and kind of look around, and long story short, he had a pretty big bourbon collection. And he asked me, he says, hey, do you want a bourbon? And that little voice in my head at first said, no, man, you don't need to drink it. Just stick with beer. And then I thought, well, why not? I'll have one. So at that point, one became two became three. I got really, really, really intoxicated. And so I hung out with him for a while. I go back home, and my wife and son had been out running errands, and she'd gotten home, so I walked over. And anyways, she saw that I was very intoxicated, got mad, went into the house, and we had these plastic Adirondack chairs in our driveway. So I still had a cigar, so I wanted to finish it. And our driveway is kind of sloped, so it's on a little bit of an edge, or you know, a little steep downgrade. And I went to sit into this chair. I put my hand behind me. Well, as I put my hand down, I didn't realize at the time, the chair slid, and I basically crashed through it. And all I remember is looking up and seeing my feet as I rolled down the hill. And I'm like, oh man. So I kind of check myself. I stand up, and I feel, you know, I can kind of feel blood on my face. So I start touching it. I start checking it. Well, it's not stopping. I mean, it's gushing out. So I go to the garage and I get some paper towels, and I can't get it to stop. So I called my wife, and she came outside, and she thought I was throwing up. So she's upset, really aggravated. And I basically told her in a calm voice, because at this point I kind of started to sober up a little bit. And I said, hey, I'm hurt. Like, I can't stop bleeding. So we had to go to the ER, and I had to get stitches. And that for me was kind of, you know, the oh crap moment. Like, hey, this isn't good. This is out of control. And so I got stitches, and I had to come to work Monday morning. So, I mean, I see several people throughout the day, and now I have this big, you know, wound on my face with stitches, and I had a big scrape on my forehead. You probably can't see it on camera, but I was pretty banged up. And, you know, I had to kind of own that pretty quick. And it was embarrassing. I mean, it really was.
So did this was a wake up call for you?
Not right away. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So I was going to say this is a wake up call for you, or you're saying not. It wasn't quite a wake up call yet. What did your clients say when they saw you? Did you explain to them what happened?
So I didn't give the full story to the majority of them. I made something up, like I was horsing around on a mountain bike in my driveway, and because I was embarrassed. I mean, I was really embarrassed about it. And you know, my son saw it, and I had to tell him something different, and I really felt bad about it. I mean, I looked like an idiot, and I felt, you know, I really felt like, hey man, this is ridiculous. I mean, you're too old to be doing this crap. And I told a few of my close clients what had happened, and you know, some people thought it was no big deal. Like, hey, I've had accidents when I've been drinking, or I've fallen before, and no one really seemed taken aback other than my immediate family. But that the wake up call came that following week, and that from there I kind of moved on.
So talk to me a little bit about what moving on looked like. As far as was it a decision that you made at that point that you were done with alcohol?
Not right away, but at the time, my wife and I had been in counseling, and she gave me an ultimatum. She said, either you get help or I'm gone. And the therapist we were seeing, he looked at me and he said, you need to get into some kind of program. You know, you have all the characteristics of an alcoholic, and you need to make a decision. You either choose alcohol or you choose your family. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not going to choose alcohol over my family. So that right there was kind of my aha moment. Like, okay, time to own it up, time to drop the ego and say, maybe I do need to look into something and get some help. And that wasn't easy. That was hard to do.
Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about what happens from there. How does this turnaround look? Was it difficult giving up the alcohol? Did you still crave it? Did you have slip ups?
So in the very beginning, it was difficult if I went to a restaurant. And I'm a big believer in environment. If you put yourself in a situation where there's alcohol and you're not drinking it, for me personally, it's going to be really hard, at least at that point, not now, but back then, it was hard for me to be around it. So the only time I ever really saw it was at a restaurant, because my family, growing up, we didn't have alcohol in the house. I didn't grow up with it. And so that was only for a little bit, I'd say for a couple months, but I had a really strong support group through my church that I kind of leaned on. I wasn't transparent like am today with you. It was more discreet, but I still leaned on them without them really knowing it at first. So that helped me. But to answer your question, for the first couple months it was, and then it didn't seem to bother me as much.
Mm-hmm. And even today, so through the journey, you struggled in the beginning, and then it got easier. What about today? Are you completely you don't drink any alcohol?
No, I've been sober for 16 months.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't drink anything.
Yeah. 16 months
but I also don't go around it, so.
Right. No, that's very important. I agree with you 100%. Like, we are a product of the people we hang around, the environments that we put ourselves in. Like, we are a product of that. So we have to be very intentional and careful about putting ourselves in those situations.
Sure.
Is it difficult for you today? Do you ever think about it, or?
I really don't, Amber. Like, I really don't think about it. And it's been so long that I really don't even remember, what it's like to be in that state. I will say this: we went to the beach in July, and in the past, I mean, a typical day at the beach for me would just be hanging out and drinking beer. So when we went to the beach, I was kind of looking around going, man, this is boring. Like, I need to be doing something. But that's really the only time it's kind of hit me. Like, I don't sit and think about it during the day, or if I go to a restaurant, I really just don't think about it. And I feel so much better now that I don't have that. I'm not a slave to it like I was. And it's so weird, the amount of, even just the time that I have more time on the weekends now, because I'm not running a clock in my head about, well, I got to stop drinking at 4 p.m. because I got to get up at 4 tomorrow, or I got to get these two, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, I just don't have that pressure like I used to, and I'm free from it, which is a really good feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can totally, I can relate to that some. Like, I don't know that I ever had a drinking problem, but I know I have an addictive mentality. And so every time I start to feel like something becomes a little bit addictive, I withdraw from it, because I don't want to be addicted or, controlled by anything.
Yeah.
But
right.
I had noticed, I noticed over this, around last summer, I was having, like, I would have a glass of wine before I'd go to bed. And that was one of those things where I had to distance myself. But one of the things I found was I felt so much better. I'm also into the fitness stuff, and it's like, I felt better in my workouts. I felt clearer in my mind, and and now I'm just like, why would I even want to go back? I've not had anything to drink since the first I did New Year's Eve, and I'm like, I don't even really want that.
Yeah. Well, and I think alcohol is very powerful, and if you don't respect it, you're going to get burned by it. And I didn't respect it. I really didn't. And I thought I could control it. Some people can do great, and I'm not anti-alcohol by any means. For myself, there's no way I could go back to it, and I wouldn't. But I know plenty of people that have a healthy relationship with it. But for me personally, I can't. There's just no way.
Yeah. So tell me about how things have improved, or what does your life look like now as far as having the alcohol and now transitioning to not having any? What's the things that this has done in your life?
Sure. So when I was a drinker, I was irritated all the time. I was stressed out. Wasn't happy. Really had no purpose in life. My relationship with God was very just, I wouldn't say turbulent, but it really wasn't there. I mean, I still prayed. I still thought about the afterlife, but I didn't take it serious. And so when I stopped drinking, I really got into listening to podcasts and reading books. I got really into Jordan Peterson and 12 Rules for Life, books like that. Well, I started a morning routine, and I still do it. I do it every single day. And that was really beneficial for me. And it was something I wouldn't be able to do if I was drinking the night before, because I mean, I have to get up a little bit earlier to be able to do it. And it's really strengthened my faith. I read scripture every day. And, I've really gotten more involved at my church. And I actually, October of 22, so the incident I was talking about earlier was in October 21 and October 22. So about a year after I stopped drinking, I dedicated my life to Christ again. And for me, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
That's really kept me on the right path.
Yeah. And you're very active in your men's group now, the group of men that you go to church with. Is that correct?
Yeah, and at the time they had a men's Bible class on Wednesday night. So that was the group I kind of initially joined. And at this point, it's kind of turned more into just an adult class. And I don't go to that like I did the men's group, but I do go to, if they have an event for just the men of the congregation, I try to attend those, and have become pretty close with a lot of those guys. And some of them kind of know what I've been through, others more so than the rest. But there's a couple guys in particular that have really helped me out. And for me, I looked up to them. Mm-hmm. And it was I'm a very all or nothing person. And for years when I was a drinker, I didn't want to go back into church because I knew it was wrong. I knew drinking the way I was drinking was wrong, and I wasn't ready to give that up to devote myself to the Lord. And now I see that was just a childish mindset to have. So for me, the alcohol really kept me separated from my faith.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a big misconception that people have, that you have to clean up your life before you get into church. But I think it's misconceived, because we really need to get into church to clean up our life. Like having that influence.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, having the influence, having scripture, having people that's going to help you through this, through this time. It's so important that I think sometimes people run from it. I know my own personal experience with church and with, the Lord. I've ran from it sometimes. So you're active in church now, and you found a lot of comfort through just walking with the Lord through this whole process. What are your thoughts as far as, like, what would you recommend if someone's struggling with alcohol? Like, what are your thoughts as far as what you would tell them, what they need to do?
My first thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help, because as a guy, a lot of us think it's weak to ask for help or to share our feelings or our emotions. And I would say find someone that you trust and lean into them and just say, hey, I think I might have a problem, or, can I just talk to you? I do have a little bit of experience with AA, and I'm happy to share that if you want me to.
Sure.
But I do think it's going to take a support network to an extent. Kind of, you said it earlier, like, who you spend your time with. But and I tried AA. I read their big blue book, and I went to 2 meetings, and I don't want to talk bad about them or bash them, but it wasn't for me. I couldn't relate to most of the people there, just because some of the stories that I heard, their level of drinking was, I couldn't even comprehend it. And I'm not judging. I mean, it was stories just kind of where it was they had to have it to just function. And I never felt that way. It was more just, for me, it was a destructive habit that I used to try to escape on the weekend. And I went to 2 different meetings, so it was 2 different groups, but I just didn't really, I don't know, I just didn't really fit in with it. And I found more support within the church that I go to, so I just felt more comfortable with that environment.
Yeah. Do you ever think of starting any kind of men's group or any kind of support system for men who might be struggling through this?
It's funny you say that. I would love to, and that's something that I'm kind of looking at maybe trying to figure out or get involved with kind of down the road. I really feel like there's several people like myself that were just too ashamed to ask for help, and they didn't know how to go about it. And you just kind of hit the nail on the head about, some of us have this idea we have to clean our life up before we go to church. I was one of those people. And I want people to realize that God loves you no matter what you've done, you're not your past. And I struggled with that for years.
Man, I think we all do on some level, because it's something I struggled with too. And that's something else I wanted to ask you about as far as the shame goes, because you said something earlier about men don't really like to share their emotions and things. And I'm just curious, because obviously I'm not a man, so I can't relate to that. But I'm wondering if with the shame, does that play a part as to why you think men doesn't want to share?
Yeah, it's a big part. I think for a lot of men it's the shame. I really do. And they just don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to not let that define them. And that was me. I mean, that's really why I drank. Because whenever I would drink, that's when all those insecurities would come out, and I would think about things that, I didn't accomplish in life, and I felt like failure. And I didn't think that way when I was sober. It was in there, but it didn't really come to the surface until I would get intoxicated. So yes, I think it is a lot of shame for sure. Because there's a lot of pressure on men. I mean, you don't hear it about as much, but there is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Men wear a lot of weight on their shoulders as far as being a provider, being a supporter, society makes it out like men should be this strong person of the family. And I believe that is something that men carry that women don't. And, as I embarked on this project, when I started, I was really working primarily with women. And there was a man that said this to me. He said, why are you only covering women? Men have traumas too. And it stuck. It hit me hard. And I was like, it's so true. And it looks a little bit different, maybe because we're different, different genders. We experience the world a little bit differently. We have different social pressures and things. But we still struggle with the same thing. I struggled just like you with shame. I struggled with validation issues. It's like we're humans. And I feel like sometimes it's so hard because people don't want to come out because they are in fear of being judged or criticized or, whatever. And I think that it's so important to share so that people know they're not alone.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think more people would be a lot healthier if they could, find ways to focus on that and not carry that burden of shame in themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you because I think what you're doing is amazing. Since I've kind of started this project, I've had people reach out to me and share stories with me. They're not ready to share them publicly, but they'll share them with me on a private, an inbox or whatever. And I think it's so important. Women wear a lot of their emotions on their sleeves, where I think men try to hide that. And so to have someone like yourself, strong guy, who's coming out and saying, hey, I've had this struggle. I've dealt with the shame of it. I've dealt with the different parts of it, but I'm willing to share it because maybe I can help somebody else. And I think that's so important. So, man, I can't even tell you how much I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it makes me feel better to be able to be healthy enough now to be able to talk about it and share it and not kind of hide in the shadows anymore and not let my past define me. And it's taken some work, but I'm definitely in a much better place now than I was. Yeah.
And we're going to do a shoot together. We have it coming up pretty soon.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm going to be anxious to see kind of like your journey from here on. Because I also, you said something and I agree with you 100% that we have this thing where by sharing, by coming out and saying it, by putting things into the open, it releases that burden off of us, kind of like it has no longer has a hold on us anymore. And I think it's biblical. When you read scripture, I think it's very biblical. Confession of sins, confession of things.
Right.
And we see this in natural everyday life, but this is why I'm very passionate about helping people share their stories, because I think it does a lot of healing inside of us individually, but then it also has the potential to heal, communities, to heal groups of people. So just to make a ripple effect. So
I was gonna say, I think it's really cool that you're doing this project and you're kind of shedding light on an area that you don't see a lot about. I mean, I really, till I met you, I've not really seen, at least in the local area, especially with men, you don't really see this a whole lot. So it's been really, really an honor for me to be involved in this project, because I do feel like that the more I can share my story, hopefully I can help people. And I actually did a post on Instagram a few months ago, and I was pretty transparent. It was building up to this podcast we're doing right now. And the overview was just that on the outside, I'm a personal trainer, took care of myself physically, but on the inside, I struggle with alcohol addiction. And I had, I think, 4 or 5 people reach out to me and say, hey, I struggle with the same thing. And, do you have any advice? Or, and it was really cool to feel like, okay, I can do more than just put someone through a workout or help them with their nutrition. I can actually help them with their mental health, which to me is really important.
So important. It's so important. And that makes that you never know the ripple effect that something like this causes, like just by sharing. I had a lady tell me once, she said, all you have to do is just open your mouth and start sharing with people. And I was like, that's true. You never know what doors are going to open or what lives are going to be impacted. You never really know. So I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else that you want to add or anything else you want to say?
I would just like to say this, that no matter who you are and what your past is, God loves you, and everyone is worthy of getting healthy and being healed. So don't let your past define you. Don't carry that burden or that shame just because you feel like you're not worthy. And I'm talking to myself. I dealt with that for years, but I really feel like that there are a lot of people in your life that you may not even know that love you and want to help you. So just ask for it. And it's sometimes it's hard to ask, but it's usually there. If you want it and you want to reach out for it, it's usually right in front of you.
Well, and I just want to say something to that. We as humans, like, that is part of we are put here. We're all connected. We're put here to help. Like, I may help you, you may help me at some point. So it's like, I have a really hard time as well asking for help. So I can relate to that. But I also know that sometimes that's also like part of the human experience, is being able to ask for help when we're not strong, when we're weak in some area. So I think that's a great piece of advice. For sure. So Steve, yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate you so much. Like I said, I'm so happy that you came on, and I can't wait to do your shoot. I've got some powerful ideas in mind, and I think it's gonna be really awesome. So we'll have to get back and maybe do another episode later on, and see where you're at, later on down the journey. But yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll put all your contact info as well, like in our show notes, and then go from there so people can get in contact with you and go from there.
Great. Thank you so much, Amber.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.